Right. Good afternoon. Today's final session in this room. I think we've got more things happening later. I'm here to introduce Sarah Klein, who will be doing talk, His Duty to Talk, Teaching the Holocaust Using AR. So Sarah serves as Holocaust Museum LA's Senior Manager, Museum Education, with the goal of making Holocaust education accessible for all. Previous areas of research include Moroccan Jewry. In 2023, Sarah became an Auschwitz Legacy Fellow, participating in the year-long educational fellowship sponsored by the Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial Foundation. So we will have some time for questions at the end, but for now I shall hand over to Sarah.
Thank you so much, Ben. And hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Klein, and I'm so grateful to be here with you all today. And if you haven't gotten a chance already, feel free, if you would like, to scan the QR codes. The first one is going to take you to what we're talking about today, and that's the Sobibor Augmented Reality application, and it's free to download on the Apple Store. And then the second QR code is going to take you to our website to download the teacher guide for it. I have some physical copies of it if anybody would like to take one as well. I will be referencing a few pages from the guide itself, so just so you're aware and you have those resources. So just a little bit about who we are. So Holocaust Museum LA is actually the first Holocaust museum founded in the United States in 1961. We're also the first Holocaust in the United States to be founded by Holocaust survivors. Our founding survivors actually met in Hollywood while they were taking English classes because they had just immigrated to the United States. And they realized not only did they have these very precious artifacts that had miraculously weathered the Holocaust, but they wanted a space to commemorate those who perished, honor those who survived, and educate future generations on the tragedy that was the Holocaust. And it's really because of their foresight that we have our incredible campus in Pan Pacific Park in Los Angeles. Because mind you, the 1960s was still an extremely taboo time to be talking about the Holocaust, let alone Holocaust education. And so because of our founding survivors' mission, our educational philosophy really revolves around teaching the Holocaust using primary sources, specifically artifacts and written and oral testimony. And we found, because we have students coming in and out of the museum every day, that when students see and interact with artifacts, whether that's a handwritten diary or a Torah that's also survived the Holocaust, you see recognition and you see a connection that starts to form that's beyond just the textbook. And one of the things we also strive to do at Holocaust Museum LA is really think about the ways we can evolve our education and evolve bringing our primary source material, like our artifacts and testimony, to students and to visitors at our museum. And specifically, we also really focused on firsthand accounts of the Holocaust, specifically fostering empathy through intergenerational connections. We find that survivor stories really bring abstract numbers and events to life, especially whether it's a survivor talking about their story of survival and resilience, or a descendant of a survivor, like their child or grandchild. We even are in the process of teaching their great-grandchildren how to tell their family story. You see this human element, connection, being brought to more than just a statistic or a historical figure. And especially because survivor stories incorporate universal human emotions like fear, loss, hope, and resilience that really resonate across not only different cultures, but different time spans as well. And so that really brings us to our challenge, and that's how can a museum bring its unique collection to life and make Holocaust education innovative and accessible to students worldwide. And now this challenge really came about during COVID. We really realized quickly that we had to pivot from doing in-person student tours and survivor dialogues. We quickly started doing online and virtual activities, but we wanted to make our collection also accessible. And not only did we find this needed, but we thought that this isn't just needed for COVID, this is beyond, because not only do we think of accessibility in terms of proximity, but also economic barriers as well? And also, as new generations are especially attached to digital platforms and have educational technology at the palm of their fingertips, we really want to connect with young people and continue teaching the Holocaust in not only an engaging but a relatable way. And so one of our main projects was getting involved with Magnopus, which is a design studio based in Los Angeles that really develops different XR experiences. And we took one of our largest artifacts in our collection, the Sobibor model, which was created by a Holocaust survivor from the Sobibor death camp, and we turned it into an augmented reality application. Thomas Blatt, who created the model, who you can see right here, this is him right after the war, he actually made this model because he was so enraged that there was no evidence. No one knew about Sobibor and what had happened there and all of the mass atrocities. And so he made this model as a way not only of remembrance, but also to make sure that his parents, his village that were murdered there, and over 200,000 Jews were remembered. And he donated it to the museum in the 1970s. And so I always, when I'm either teaching this with students or I'm presenting it in a professional development training with educators, I always have to kind of go over what augmented reality is. With students, I always mention Pokemon Go because the students' eyes always light up and they're like, ooh, we get that. And so augmented reality uses a real existing environment and places a digital image on top of it, as you can see in the picture right here. A lot of museums have been using it to supplement their in-person artifacts. I always say it's the opposite or the inverse of VR, where you step into a virtual world. You're using the existing world, you're just overlaying an image on top of it. And so we recognize that within our augmented reality application itself, it's not enough. There's more context that needs to be had, especially if we're using it as an educational tool to use in the classrooms. So one thing that we focused on as we developed this app was also developing curriculum to go hand in hand with it as well. And this is how the teacher guide on the Sobibor virtual model was created. And you can see here, this is a quite comprehensive guide. We started off with a basic just overview of Holocaust history because we believe that in order to know what was lost, you need to know what was there to begin with. And so we also, though, go outside of the Holocaust into modern day examples of anti-Semitism so that, again, anti-Semitism does not look like it exists in a vacuum between 1933 to 1945. And then we get into what is Sobibor and introduce not only the camp and how we got to this point, but also Thomas Blatt's story as well. And then we also have various worksheets that help students not only with their analyzation skills, but also really think about connecting this microhistory to the macro history. And so when I have a teacher training or when I delve into this application, I really focus on the Polish Jewish community and Thomas Blatt's story because it's so important to know the reason why this artifact was created. So the Polish Jewish community, as well as many other Eastern European Jewish communities, was diverse. It was rich and cultural with traditions. You had some families living in secular urban lives in Krakow or Warsaw. And then you also had Jewish families living in more traditional and Jewish, smaller insular Jewish towns like shtetls. And Thomas Toivi Blatt, born April 15th, 1927, was born in a shtetl in Izbice, Poland. And the town was about 5,000 people, mostly Jewish, around 90%. And he had a relatively normal life. He grew up with his mother, Masha, his father, Leon, and he had a younger brother, Hertz. And he really enjoyed spending holidays with them and his extended family. He remembers that he did have some Christian neighbors, and while they were definitely separated, they got along relatively well. And he attended public school until the 6th grade. Thomas really described his town, which you can see here, as a typical shtetl, which is, of course, Yiddish for small town. And shtetls were really unique to Eastern Europe and were smaller to larger towns where the majority of the population of the town was Jewish, so anywhere between 60 to 90%, even in some cases 100%. And again, you see this pair with worksheet 66, 68. On the pages of the guide, we have questions to go with these photographs. So for instance, this is the only photograph that Thomas had of his family after the war. Knowing that his family did not survive, what does this picture tell you, or what do you think this picture meant to Thomas after the war compared to before? So really analyzing cultural material and what does an object mean to somebody. This is, of course, his town of Izbica, Poland, right here. And I always like to note that although this is a shtetl, not all shtetls looked either like run down or shabby. They had a variety of different locations. Just I always like to make that kind of notation just so we're not furthering stereotypes. And then Thomas was 12 years old at the outbreak of World War II in 1939 when Nazi Germany invaded. And also what happened was shortly after the invasion of Poland, the Nazis established ghettos, centralized enclosed areas in which Jewish communities were isolated, making it easier for Nazis to control them. Izbica actually became a ghetto, and Jews from outside the town were forced in. And one of the reasons Izbica became a ghetto was because of this right here. You can see the railway. Izbica was located in a very central location that made it easier for Jews being deported from, say, the Netherlands or France or other areas further away in Eastern Europe to come and then be deported to death camps that were very close by. And so the Izbica ghetto became the largest ghetto in the Lublin district and soon became a key transfer point. Thomas recalls that despite the Nazis' attempts to veil their murderous activities of the death camp, the Jewish community of Izbica knew what was happening there. They saw as thousands of people were being sent to Sobibor, but none of them ever returned. And so really understanding the potential danger, Thomas's mother, Masha, organized false papers for Thomas to go by train. However, he was caught and then he was actually sent to prison. However, after 6 months in jail, Thomas managed to escape and make his way back to the Izbica ghetto, where him and his family went into hiding. However, Thomas and his family ended up being deported to Sobibor on April 28, 1943, right after he turned 16 years old. And again, just to go over, death camps, Belzec, Sobibor, and Treblinka had no purpose other than mass murder. They were a part of Operation Reinhard, and they specifically used carbon monoxide within the gas chambers. Upon arrival at the camp, prisoners were ordered to leave their belongings, strip off their clothes. The deception was so great. For example, in France, they were told to not turn off to turn off their electricity or gas as to not run up the bill. This is Thomas's perspective and testimony upon arriving to Sobibor death camp.
France ordered women and children on one side, men on the other side. I was in that time 15 years old. This is an age, it could go both ways. But I was with my mother. So I kissed my mother goodbye, and I said something which I can forgive myself till now. You are a psychologist, you should, maybe you will understand. Many times I think I will go to a psychiatrist to resolve this, and I didn't go till now, and maybe probably will die and wouldn't go. What I said was this. You see, a day before they took us to Sobibor, I was thirsty and told my mommy, could I have a glass of milk? And she said, yes, open the ice box. In Poland, at that time, they have wooden boxes with ice and with pieces of ice. I opened the ice box and took the milk and started to drink. And she said, oh, stop it, leave something for tomorrow. Tomorrow's another day. So what I said now to my mother is, you see, Mommy, you said today is another day. You didn't let me drink the milk. And she said, "Is that all you have to say?" And this way we departed. And I left to my father, and my 10-year-old brother left to my mother. We passed, actually, we crossed that way. And when the division was conducted, the order was in the stencil for the women and children to go in the direction where the fence was, and they left, and this was the last time I've seen them. And later we men were standing. And Frenzel turned to us and said, "Who's a carpenter? Who's a tailor? Who's a mechanic?" And people, knowing this is the last chance to stay alive, picked up the hands of mechanic. Me, 15 years old, what could I be? 15 years ago to school. But inside, I begged, and that time I still believed in God, and begged to God, "God, help me, please, let me stay alive. Pray to this German, please take me." And I still believe, I strongly believe. You know, you are aware, besides vocal communication, there's something which people could transmit like a radio wave. I still believe that some way my strong will reach them, because at a point when he passed me, when our eyes met, and inside I said to me, "You must take me." He stopped, looked at me and said, "Komm raus, du Kleiner. You will my shoe putzen. Come out, you little one, you will be my shoeshine boy." And I stepped out and was attached to the group of about 40 people. In this way, I was included in the working force of Sobibor. The rest were told, my father included, my brother to go with my mother. My father included to go, the orders to go in the direction where the fire was, where I find out later the gas chamber were. This way I started to work in Sobibor.
So there's a lot to unpack with that clip. You see Thomas struggle with not only his identity. Does he go with his mother and his younger brother, or does he go with his father? And he really has to make that decision. But also his last moments with his mother as well, and about the milk can, and about not drinking the milk and saving it for another day. And so this is how, as he said, he came to be a working force in Sobibor. There were around 200 to 300 enslaved prisoners at Sobibor. As I mentioned, Sobibor had the purpose, sole intention of mass murder. So unlike other camps, there was not a lot of work to be had. However, there was a need to maintain the camp. Thomas started out as a shoeshine boy. However, he would work many jobs in the camp, one of them being with hair, and then he would go on to be a messenger. And so the German SS and police authorities opened Sobibor in 1942 as the second of 3 death camps established as a part of Operation Reinhard. Operation Reinhard was the code name the Nazis gave to the plan to murder 2 million Jews in gas chambers and set up in occupied Poland. And it was implemented in 1941. This plan included the construction of 3 death camps, including Belzec, Sobibor, and Treblinka. The Nazis constructed Sobibor camp near the small village of Sobibor in East Poland after measuring the track and ramp of the railway line and village station. In size, it was about at its highest point, the size of 33 soccer fields. We're in the UK, so I'll say football fields. And again, there was about 200, 300 prisoners at any given point. They were switched out every 6 months because, again, secrecy was taken very seriously there. So they were murdered. And so when each kind of transportation came in the trains, they would select, in Thomas's cases, it was about maybe 40 people out of the lineup to work at the camp. Also, something really important to know, Sobibor was consisted of 3 separate lagers or camps. So lager 1 contained the barracks for the few prisoners that were there, along with the prisoner-run kitchen and buildings that provided services to Nazi guards. Also, Lager 2 was established to assist the daily operations of the camp. So this not only included for instance, administration building or a building to process possessions and of the victims coming into the camp. It also included, for instance, an imposing watchtower, as well as a small stable, really anything to make it look like a very warped town, because that is the place where the prisoners or the people being deported were coming to be dropped off. And Thomas, I don't know if you caught it, mentioned a walkway between Lager 2 and Lager 3. This walkway was known as the Road to Heaven by the SS guards, because Lager 3 was where the gas chambers and the open-faced crematoria were located. Most Jews deported to Sobibor came from the Lublin district of Poland. However, this was because there were a lot of different transfer points. You also had Jews coming from Northern and Western Europe as well, such as the Netherlands. I mentioned that Thomas worked with hair and shearing specifically hair. The questions he got from Jews coming from Western or Northern Europe mostly involved appearance, like, can you please not cut my hair too short? The questions he got from Jews coming from Poland and Eastern Europe were, how long does it take? Does it hurt? So there was a clear disparity in information of Jews coming into the camp. Things began to change in the summer of 1943. A group of prisoners started an underground resistance because there was rumor that the camp operations would actually be shut down and all of the enslaved prisoners would be murdered. And also things changed as a group of prisoners of war from the Soviet Union who were also Jewish were deported and became the working force of Sobibor as well. One of them actually stepped up into the leadership role of planning the uprising of Sobibor. His name was Alexander or Sasha Perchevsky, and he really crafted a plan for the escape that revolved around different the daily routines of the SS guards of Sobibor. And so what they did was they took different guards into sections, kind of lured them out with specifically items from the victims, like a fur coat or jewelry, and then they would overpower them, kill them, and take their weapons. And they were able to kill around a dozen SS guards in under an hour. And so by the time roll call was up, the people that were taking roll call actually were already gone. And so they were then able to mobilize the camp and rush to the barbed wire and make a hole. However, by that time, the guards that were left were actually caught on, and they began opening fire on the escapees. However, they did have some weapons. It ended up being there were landmines outside the barbed wire gate that they did not know about. So even though 300 ended up escaping, making it the largest, most successful uprising in Holocaust history, it did managed to kill quite a number of the people escaping. Thomas was actually saved because his clothing got caught in the barbed wire fence, and he was one of the last people to escape. And so he was able to see where the landmines had already gone off, and he reasoned that, landmines aren't going to be stacked on top of each other. So he was able to get across into the forest, where he was miraculously picked up by the Polish underground resistance, and then would be liberated actually in 1944. After the Holocaust, Thomas immigrated to Israel, where he met an American tourist, Dina, his wife, and they would eventually move to the USA in 1959. He would live in Los Angeles, Oxnard. He owned an electronics store before settling in Santa Barbara. However, Thomas was so dedicated to Holocaust education because he vividly remembers Sasha Perchevsky standing up on the table right before the uprising began and saying, if you survive this, it is your duty to talk. It is your duty to tell what has happened here at Sobibor. And so he not only taught in America about what happened and made the model, but this picture is actually him in the early 1990s at the memorial site for Sobibor, taking Polish students to teach about what had happened. He also testified in the trials of SS guards who had served at Sobibor in 1965, and even when his health was deteriorating in 2011. It's really important that whenever we talk about survivor testimony, we also give an introduction to Holocaust survivor testimony as well. There was an educator who came up to me when I first started working at the museum, and she told me a story of how she played an hour and a half long testimony for her students. Given them no context, just played the testimony, and then the students actually ended up drawing swastikas all over the classroom and doing the Heil Hitler salute. So it's so important that when we provide educational tools like testimony, whether it's in clips or whether it's through an augmented reality application, we also provide context as well, because this is extremely sensitive topic and information, and it's important, I always say, to preface, whether it's testimony or the app itself, that this should be treated as testimony. This should be treated as an artifact, not a game, and it should be given the empathy, sensitivity, and respect that it deserves. And so in doing that, we've also created specifically questions to help with process not only what happened at Sobibor, the app itself, and Thomas's story. We've also really wanted to dive into what is a complex identity and explore more of the Jewish tradition. So here we have, in the Jewish tradition, there is a command to learn about the past called Zachor, which means to remember. And it's really important to note that Zachor is not passive. It's a positive action to make the world a better place. And so then for students, we have questions such as, what does it mean to learn about the past? What is a story in your own life that you would want to pass on to future generations? What is an identity? What is your identity? And how do you determine your identity? This is another testimony clip from Thomas, the Sobibor uprising in his own words.
Here, all the clothing, why the people were still alive, walking here to the gas chambers, the clothing was already sorted here, and packed. There were 600 workers there. And we realized that our end will be the same. A few people just talk about escape, but nothing happened until our transport arrived on the end of September. As I said, Sobibor was expanding, and they did need more people. So the Germans picked up about 70 people from the incoming transport. They picked up young people, healthy people, not having an idea that most of them were officers or soldiers. And we had the knowledge, the old prisoners had the knowledge of the working of this camp in the territory. Together, we planned a revolt. There were many plans how to escape. But finally, one was picked up who did promise some kind of a success, possibility of success. The plan was that we should lure the Nazis one by one to some places where they will be killed, where our people in the organization, a few of them, actually 3 of them, will be waiting for them, and lure them. Telling them to go here or there, because we didn't know the hobby of many Germans. We didn't know one like leather stuff, the another like gold. So, for example, I have seen here a German walking, Wolf, and I went to him and took down my hat, stay attention, and said, Herr Oberscharführer, we find in the sorting area, we did find a beautiful leather coat, exactly your size. Would you like to check it over? Go over there and take a look of if you like it. When he put in the hand in the sleeves, the hand were tied up so he can't move, and he was hit with an axe and killed. In this way, in a matter of an hour, slowly, we killed about 80% of the Nazis. At a point, Sasha Pechorsky, the leader, jumped on this table and had a short speech. He said, friends, Jews, the moment of revenge did come. We should remember what's happened here, to tell the world, if somebody will survive, his duty is to talk and say what the Nazis, what the Germans have done here. And suddenly somebody from the middle of us started to yell hurrah, and everybody started to yell hurrah. So somebody showed up with an axe, cut a hole in the barbed wires, and people stood in the line to go through the hole. At a point when I was going through the hole, the ladder, the fence, under the weight of people trying to get over it, collapsed and pinned me down. And I was under the fence, under the broken fence, and I thought, oh, now I'm not even wounded, and I will stay in Sobibor, the end of it. But actually, this later I realized that this saved me, actually, because when being under the fence, I've seen people killed by the mines, their hands, legs flying there, and finally everybody, it was no more people, so stepping over me on the fence. So I managed and was running 100 feet, 200, 150, and finally I made it to the forest. According to German documents, about 320 escaped. But the next day, some were killed. But according to, again, the German documents, about 100 people were killed the next day while they were caught in the forest. As a matter of fact, from the 320 which escaped, now let's say 100 were killed in the dragnet, still would be about 200 people left. Only 52 survived the war. Today, you can't even, there's nothing there. There's signs and a little mountain from ashes, and this is what is left. So people should know about Sobibor.
And so I think this is a very powerful quote that we always pair with the app when introducing it. The model, this story, is not intended to be a tool for self-pity. It is intended to be a warning for humanity, to be a guard against forces of darkness, to be on guard against blind hatred and prejudice. And you can see this is the actual model that he created, which is available at our museum. He not only built it from his memory, as you know, in Messenger, he also interviewed several of the other 50 survivors from the uprising as well. And so for the application, not only is it free to download from the Apple Store, it is also has a virtual guide, as you can see on the corner right here, and you can toggle that on and off. The virtual docent or guide is Ben Feldman, who is an actor you might have seen in the comedy Superstore or Mad Men. Also, something we are working on currently is that it is only available for Apple or iOS devices. We are currently working on making it accessible and, of course, free for Android devices as well. Something, again, just to make sure that the volume is turned on when used, because if you do want to use it with the virtual survivor guide, it does need sound. Also, there is background sounds as well that are important for the overall experience. And then this is a video showcasing you not only how to use the application. One of the things we did while we were beta testing the app is have a student feedback group test it out. And we really wanted to see how it engages young people as well. And so this is my colleague, Jordana Gessler, along with several students from throughout Los Angeles, and their feedback on the Sobibor AR application.
Welcome, students, and hello to everyone watching this presentation from Holocaust Museum LA, where we are developing new tools and technology to deliver enhanced learning experiences using augmented reality. Today, I've invited a few students to experience a prototype that we are developing of the Sobibor Death Camp. The application is based on an exhibit here at the museum of a scale model of the camp built by Holocaust survivor Thomas Blatt from his memories and experiences as a young teenage boy who survived the Holocaust. The app we will be exploring allows you to experience and interact with Mr. Blatt's model at your home, in a classroom, or even here at the museum. Have all of you downloaded the app on your iPhone and iPad? Wonderful. Let's take a moment to explore together. So when you're ready to explore the application, you just find a table or flat surface like a desk, scan the area, and all of a sudden you have the Sobibor Death Camp. And here you can see just an aerial view. You notice some movement. So either the smoke coming out of the arriving train, even some numbers. So let's explore this number 18. The roof is removed. Here we're looking at the barrack for sorting hand luggage and valuables. And by zooming into the barrack itself, you can see Jewish prisoners sorting through the possessions of the victims under the menacing eye of an SS guard. And if you go back to that number 18, you'll notice an icon for looking at more photographs. So here we have prisoners' eyeglasses, which were sorted and distributed to German civilians, or a birthday charm from the bracelet of an innocent Dutch girl murdered in the camp, or even a murdered woman's gold ring. And you can expand to get more of an aerial view, or you can zoom in on a specific area that you want to learn more about. So perhaps one or two of you could unmute and tell me a little bit about your experience, what you thought, and what your takeaways were.
When I first opened the app yesterday, I immediately thought, oh my God, this is so much different than just reading about a death camp in a textbook and you're not actually there experiencing it. You can imagine what it might look like, but you're actually never there. And so getting this almost personalized animated experience of being there, I immediately thought, I want to share this with my community. I want to share this in my history class, like in my AP Euro class. It's just an app that I really think is going to change education about the Holocaust and rising anti-Semitism for the better.
And I thought it was really interesting and valuable to be able to both see the model, but also be able to read about each and everything and also be able to see where exactly each and all of these different things were. And I thought it was a really valuable experience to be able to learn, but also to be able to understand how things were in a very unique way.
So I was really interested in what kind of emotional response the app would elicit. I've been to camps in Europe and I've also seen these little models in museums before, and this kind of felt like being in the middle of those two. When you see a model in a museum, you don't feel very much. You're more interested in the facts, like where things were. And then when you're visiting in person, it's very emotional and it's less about the sort of details. And I felt like this was, again, that perfect middle where I wanted to read, but I was also slightly like uncomfortable.
I immediately was immersed within this virtual realm on the app, and I was completely stunned because of the noises within the application also feel like they immersed me within the camp. So I had the camp on my table, and number 47 really stunned me the most, which is the one with the watchtower. And you often hear about these through facts, and you often see pictures, but it isn't until you're there within this environment that you totally understand the reality of what happened. And it sets up this emotional experience, a one-on-one experience, almost as if you were there.
It was like absolutely mind-boggling that there was a whole model of a concentration camp right in front of me. And my mom came in and she's like, "What are you doing?" And she came behind the iPad that I was holding and she said, "Wow." We said, "Dad, come over here." And he came over and he came behind the iPad and he kept looking and like pinching and he's like, "Oh wow, there are people in there." Like he was looking at all the virtual people. Yeah, I think it sort of brought us very close and for a moment. So I'm very thankful that I got to try it out.
I've been learning about like Holocaust education for a long time since like I went to a Jewish elementary school. But especially this year, like in my AP Euro class, we kind of didn't really go in depth into the Holocaust. And I think that there were people in the class who don't have like a foundation of Holocaust, like education and Holocaust understanding. And I think that something like this would be really valuable for those people too.
Thank you so much for joining me today and learning more about the augmented reality capture of the Sobibor Death Camp. I hope you found it as informative and enriching as we did. I really look forward to working with you again and inviting you back for more education programs at Holocaust Museum LA. Have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone.
And so with that, we have also, after they engage with the application, again, really important to reflect with students and engage their critical thinking skills. So we've put together questions not only for them while using the app, and teachers have said that they've used the app in schools, whether they hook it up and they use just one screen and they use it with the class, or some teachers have in schools where they have not banned use of cell phones, paired each other up, like students up into groups where one student has an iPhone and they've gone outside and they've really explored the app together and answered questions, and other teachers have used this application in homework or a research assignment. And so it's really diverse setting in which students can experience this AR. And we also, this is a pot that Thomas actually buried before the uprising, and he actually went back to Sobibor to dig up his bowl because it was so important to him. This is actually a quote from Thomas. "Each of us was given our own eating pot. The workday ended at 5 o'clock. I picked up my aluminum pot from under my pillow of my bunk and joined the others in line for supper. When my turn came, the cook at the dispensary poured about 16 ounces of black liquid that tasted like lightly sweetened warm water. I received dark bread with a warning that it should last me until the evening." So again, we really want to further contextualize the artifacts and the objects that they're seeing within the augmented reality application. So while they have a picture and they can understand that this bowl belonged to Thomas Blatt, with the teacher guide and supplemental questions, they can further understand that this pot meant life or death to Thomas. And especially considering what does this bowl mean to him, that he buried it and then went back to the site of this mass atrocity to where his parents, his family, his most of his town was murdered. And what do you think this bowl means to him now? It's important as we, again, explore this realm with educational technology that we're making responsible methodological choices, And so first, graphic material should be used judiciously and only to the extent necessary to achieve the objective lesson. Within the augmented reality itself, there's a digital animation of the escape, of them going through the barbed wire and having the guards open fire on them. It's not gory, it's not graphic, but it is does depict what happened. And it's important that we don't sensationalize the Holocaust as well. And in doing so, we should not use simulation exercises, i.e. role play, even when great care is taken to prepare a class for such an activity. Simulating experiences from the Holocaust remains pedagogically unsound. The activity may engage people, but they often forget the purpose of the lesson and can be left with the impression that they now know what it was like to suffer or even participate in the Holocaust, and we will never know what it was like. And again, approaching the topic with sensitivity, empathy, and respect for the victims, survivors, and their families. I mentioned this, it's very important, I think, to preface the app before going into it with the group, that it is not a game, that it should be treated like the in-person artifact, like the physical artifact. And then lastly, avoid altering or manipulating historical images or footage in a way that distorts the truth. And then here are the other worksheets that we've created to pair with the augmented reality application. And these include Nazi propaganda worksheets. So again, students can better understand anti-Semitic tropes and stereotypes. Also more information about Thomas's childhood in photos, like some of the ones that we saw. The 10 stages of genocide worksheet, so that students can better understand that Sobibor didn't just appear one day, that there were several stages that led to the systematic mass murder. And then this is one of my favorite, actually, is the Mein Yiddish Mommy listening comprehension. As we know, students learn in a variety of ways. And so Mein Yiddish Mommy was a popular song, and Thomas actually vividly recalls hearing this song in the barracks at night and while he was eating. And this is a great source of emotional resistance. A lot of what we're talking about today is physical resistance, but it's so important that just hearing a song that you love can remind you of your humanity. And a teacher actually approached me after one of the trainings and she said, I love this worksheet. I'm actually doing a unit on protest songs and I'm going to be including this. So again, thinking about how different parts of Thomas's life can connect to bring in this new type of education and really further a larger historical narrative. And then we also have Sobibor Perpetrator Photograph Collection embedded into the app itself. So the Sobibor Perpetrator Collection was actually recently discovered in around 2020, 2021. And it was almost a vacation album of the commandant of Sobibor, Johann Niemann. And it was donated to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, and the 62 images can be found for free online. And so what we've done is beforehand you could not see anything about what Sobibor looked like. Thomas said, there's nothing that remains because they completely leveled the camp because the final stage of genocide is denial. And so to get rid of the evidence, they completely just destroyed everything that was there. And these pictures were actually the first pictures of what Sobibor looked like as a camp. Unfortunately, they were brought to light after Thomas had already passed away. One of the pictures actually showcases the entrance in which Thomas talks about in his testimony. Thomas, it wasn't in the clip, but he describes arriving at Sobibor and the entrance had leaves sewn into the barbed wire fence. And he said, he had heard that this was hell, but when he arrived, hell didn't look so bad. These photographs had the actual picture of the camp with the leaves sewn into the barbed wire fence. And so it's important, though, that students, not only when they see this in the app, they also have questions that, again, further their analytical skills. What did you see, think, or feel as you looked at the photographs in the Sobibor Perpetrator Collection? But also, what did you not see? Because it's important to remind them that these were taken from the perpetrator's point of view. So what experiences were missing from the view of the photographer that wasn't included in, for instance, Thomas's testimony? And then again, when we talk about this augmented reality application in Sobibor and Thomas's experience, it's so important that these multiple different sources, we combine them together, whether it's the app, whether it's the testimonial clips, or whether it's one of the worksheets like Mein Yiddish Mommy. How do they come together to create a historical narrative, and what do they create when they're combined together? And with that, I just want to show you this last picture of Thomas. It's our favorite picture of him at the museum. We always like to end it because it just shows that Thomas was so much more than the absolute worst, most traumatic part of his life. He was able to experience so much joy and livelihood afterwards, and so we always like to end on this picture. With that, I want to turn it back for some questions.
A lovely picture to end on. Yes. As I know you're showing the QR code, but also just saying the arcade downstairs. We also do have the app running, so please get out and have a play. In fact, with all of the games, it's open quite late, I think, this evening, so do go have a play, try them all out. And,
yes, please come see.
Do that, yeah. Has anyone any questions? We've got a few minutes, I think. Yes, we'll start.
First of all, thank you for this very comprehensive presentation. I would like to ask, why did you choose AR for presenting this model?
Yeah.
And what is the benefit in comparison to like a regular app which has a, I don't know, clickable model or whatever, this kind of more simpler interactive activity?
Yes, that's a great question. So I mentioned we partnered with Magnopus, and because we really knew that we wanted to combine like technology with our collection, but we didn't know in what way. And when they recommended augmented reality, they did so because it was almost a collective experience as opposed to like VR, which is very individualistic. We really loved the idea with augmented reality. The application itself is meant to be mobile, and it's meant to be walked around and stand up and to be engaging. So you're engaging multiple senses, whether it's sound, sight, and then also motion. So we liked kind of all of those came together, and you still can click and you still can dive deeper. But one of the things we liked was being able to see this extremely detailed model almost come to life and be accessible in a way that once you place it down, you can zoom in and you can scroll around and you can really examine it in a way that we felt does the artifact itself purpose.
And how does, maybe I didn't understand it probably from what you have shown, how does the model interact with the environment?
Yes.
Like with what is filmed or what is...
Yes, so I would definitely encourage everybody to come down to the arcade, and I can show you. It's much easier when I can show you, but essentially, and I'll get up to you for this, but you have to place the model on a surface. A table is the easiest, and so once you place it, it interacts because you can zoom in, and then to go to different areas, you can walk around and zoom in as well. And so because it's quite a large model, you really have to kind of maneuver, and you go on almost a small journey in order to explore the camp.
So another question over here.
Yeah, thank you as well for me for a very fascinating presentation. What I find most fascinating on this model, both the analog one and the digital one, is that it's based on the memory of Thomas, and I was just wondering how this, I call it an asset, is interwoven and used in the teaching based on this model, because a couple of years ago I listened to a lecture on the topic of emotions in Holocaust history, and some people just told that when looking at writings on the Holocaust by survivors, or looking at their paintings they did in the aftermath, that you can see some spots in the camps, for example, which are darker, some are lighter, and that you can draw some psychological conclusions from that, because perhaps they memorize some places as more terrible than others. And I was just wondering how this is mirrored in the model, both in the AR application and in the physical one.
That's such a great question. So Thomas actually, he created this from memory and also other people's memory as well. And at that time, there was, again, nothing. There was no evidence. Since then, there was an Israeli archivist that has done an excavation of the camp, and we've, of course, cross-referenced. And some things there's a couple things that are kind of mismatched, but 90% of it is accurate, which was astonishing. And it's very interesting in his memoirs that he writes about Sobibor, the Forgotten Revolt, and the ashes of Sobibor. Even in the testimony too that you can saw, he still gets very emotional when talking about it. And so you can see that reflected in his writing. You can see that reflected when he's talking. So there is still that very much that trigger for him. But one of the things that we were glad to have in this incredible artifact was a model of, so people could see not only what the camp was like, but also the journey that Thomas and his family took to the gas chamber, essentially. And that's one of the things that he would specifically go into detail in talking about. So that was really interesting, because he wanted people to know, he felt a responsibility for all of the loss of life that happened there, to describe it in detail that he did. And so that was really reflected in the artifact itself.
We have a few minutes. We've got another question down here. And do this.
Yeah, first, it looks really wonderful. I can't wait to try it. My first question is, how's the model narrated? Is it based on Thomas's testimony or other contextual materials as well? And also, is the application also usable for the actual physical model in the exhibition, or is it only as a kind of model version?
Yes, so the first question, so you have the option to toggle the narration on and off. The virtual guide, it's about, I want to say, like 7 to 10 minutes, and it takes you through the story, and it does include not only information about Sobibor, but also Thomas's story as well, but very briefly. It doesn't go into a lot of detail. It just gives you an overview, and then it lets you explore the application. You can also just use the augmented reality application without the narration and just go into and explore the different numbers and interact with the model yourself. And yes, we do. So we are actually going through an expansion, and we're going to be highlighting this artifact a lot more. And at the moment, we do have an iPad set up, so you can access the augmented reality while you also see it in person. So we have both experiences, both the AR and the physical model together at the museum for visitors.
So we have another question back here.
Hi Sarah, that was such an interesting presentation, and I had a chance to look at that app earlier, so I encourage everyone to have a look. But my name's Claire and I work at Imperial War Museums, and I'm really interested in the student reflections. So we obviously got a taste of that from your presentation, yes. But some of the students, they looked like teenage, like 8th or 9th grade maybe. Yeah. But I noticed on the kind of header image, the children using the app look a bit younger. So apologies if I missed this at the start. Is there kind of an optimum age range to engage with this app? And if anyone of any age can engage with it, have you noticed a difference or any trends in student reflections based on their age?
Yes, so on the Apple page, it says 12 and up. Okay. We do recommend grades 6 through 12 because there is that one animation of the escape. Again, it's not graphic, but it is, like, there are noises that can be a little bit too much maybe for younger students. I do think, I've honestly heard positive feedback both from middle school and high school students. And so I think that both of those grade levels between 6 and 12 are great for interacting with the application. I would maybe, again, use your discretion with younger grades, because I do think potentially 5th grade could work, but I would just, again, with the content of it, just I always say, like, people know their classroom and people know their students, and I would always defer to the teacher for anything younger.
And are there trends in the reflections?
Yes. So one of the trends that you noticed was that it was more than a textbook. There was more of an emotional response, that it felt more like the kind of trends you hear when people get after hearing a survivor testimony, which was really interesting to see that similarity there. Also, one of the things that made it more real for them was the movement that was kind of related with the application itself, because they were walking around and exploring it together. They found it very an engaging experience. And then the other trend that was really interesting that students brought up was the kind of technology that was, and the reflections. They really were able to connect it to kind of a larger experience. They were really shocked about Sobibor and just like learning about that piece of information, even though they had already studied the Holocaust. It made it more real for them.
I'm afraid I think we're out of time because we've got a short break before tonight's keynote. But if you'd like to join me all again, thanking Sarah for